may have heard young people espouse the belief that music saved their life. Music certainly had a great impact on my life, both as a listener and a musician. However, I think podcasts have been more important to me over the past few years. The first podcast I dove into was Overnight Drive, hosted by a current and former member of the band Self-Defense Family. I also found You Made It Weird with Pete Holmes. He mostly interviews comedians. As I found work online in 2017, I kept listening to podcasts to make the repetitive tasks less monotonous. While I was categorizing, rating, and labeling fairly plain data, I was learning through listening. With my habit of long walks around the city, podcasts also kept me company. Some I gravitated to were Joe Rogan Experience, WTF with Mark Maron, The Tim Ferriss Show, Waking Up with Sam Harris, now called Making Sense, Chapo Trap House, and Hello Internet. Around this time, my brother Jack and I started a podcast called Oh Well You Bastards. We strove to make it comedy, but it was mostly hanging out with friends and following tangents. We at least made ourselves laugh and had fun with most episodes. We weren't really consistent, taking breaks when Jack was out of town or I wasn't up to talking for 2 hours. It totaled 23 episodes. I tried reusing the last episode to transition into my own podcast called Value Engineered. That one only lasted for a brief 3 episodes. The podcasts that have most recently turned me into a fan are Team Human with Douglas Rushkoff, as mentioned in my last video, NPR's Planet Money, and Eyes Left, a leftist podcast hosted by 2 veterans. All this podcast listening has yielded a multitude of facts and research that I find myself parroting in conversation. I've read books recommended and promoted on podcasts. Sometimes an interview with an author saves me the time of reading an extra book. Those still go on my list to eventually read. There is a potential of a podcast misinforming me. I could do a better job of fact-checking what I heard before repeating it. That's a shortcoming that many of us have. Other podcasts are just a good laugh. I can be entertained and learn in the same episode. Music is an important outlet for creative expression and feeling what can't be described. Podcasts stoke my curiosity, recommend other great media, and make me feel like I'm right there in the conversation when I'd otherwise be alone. This is known as a parasocial relationship, which can exacerbate to an unhealthy level, but is common in the digital age. I was introduced to that term by Shannon Strucci's excellent 2-part YouTube documentary on parasocial relationships. I'll link to that down in the description, but I digress. It's amazing to me that podcasts are free. It's true that many of the 700,000 active podcasts provide little value. The average run of a podcast is only 7 episodes. The best of the bunch more than make up for that. Some podcasters fund their shows through advertising, a Patreon for monthly donations, or paid subscriptions on their own website. One practice to make it worth the audience's money is by offering episodes that are only available to those who donate. Chapo Trap House brings in over $150,000 a month with this model. The money generated by podcasts is lower than the music industry, which most know declined in the era of digital downloads and piracy. The podcast industry totaled $479.1 million in revenue in 2018, compared to $18.9 billion by the music industry. It might be difficult for the podcast industry to expand when they're expected to be free. I was a Patreon supporter of the comedy podcast Yeah, But Still for about a year. I couldn't keep up with every episode to justify the money for longer than that. There's a shift of perception that needs to be made over the value of digital goods. Episode 146 of the Making Sense podcast, entitled Digital Capitalism, elaborates on that. Many podcasts will be forgotten, yet there are some that will stick with me for years to come. I hope you have found or will find podcasts that are as meaningful to you. You could recommend your favorite podcasts down in the comment section. Here are 2 more videos to check out if you liked what was discussed here. That about wraps it all up. Thanks for watching.